Hello, Americans and people A through Z of the human species body. Note, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. A different species body than other species bodies. Also, individual species bodies made up of a whole bunch of different individual species bodies. We have the same color eyes and have different color eyes at the same time. And there are exceptions. And there's exception nature with the communications of nature itself. But nature itself shows us the difference of itself when it's only itself as criminal insidiousness, natures of truths, appreciation of itself, or not just of negative treatments. And we can observe what is actually recorded at campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly too, sickly non distinctly too, but sickly distinctly. They have and have had other communicated than James Madison and our founders plural left communicated for them to be communicated for themselves. For example, about why and how. The only founder that we know the name of specifically is James Madison. Every other founder was counter extorted and still extorted, tortured, in fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically. And it was measured and maintained rules that they had syntactic collusions against themselves and against everyone else while pretending not to realize. Otherwise, that body was sensed. And it was adapted to including if that body was a majority of people, including if it is everyone. This is also where breaching that has people jump in if anyone brings calm, appreciation properly, or aggression properly, rather, because either way could be done to get the same premises treatments corrected. See, but we have the branches of government that are not letting people tell on their collusion /S with all sides of criminal and civil cases, news at the same time, and names at next to all natures of crime scenes and relative body dumping spots and murders. All kinds of things were confirmed on Facebook, and people recorded involved with them in all sides of criminal and civil cases, not just in America, in countries individually grouped and together. The United Nations have rules with a bunch of people tied to a Phil Collo, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and multiple judges, extended family members, and their neighbors, and different natures of conjunctions to them, to mayors, to senators, to forensics names, with the same House/S increasingly involved with wire and mail crimes of them, falsified police reports, interbranch faking transcripts and evidences, collusions at the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and with names next to campuses fit to collusions. At the same time, with the networks and name intelligence, the difference of the guilt of the intelligence there or next to. Also manifest where a breaching method uses that. These are roles with DACA that are involved with natures of industries that our country share, that they can't defend that and afford to have discerned, where the experts of the people of the sciences are supposed to have and how they're supposed to have their syntax with fact treatments, quality aspects in nature, and or with exceptions. Increasingly, there are collusions where all ages and natures of investigators, and sources of theirs rolled with it. All locations/s there were and are collusions plural with a hyper singular collusion too. That which no one wanted collusions with since before modern religious messages were born. But the republic for which we stand and its campuses and its pantheism that demonstrably was other than for allowing to be appreciated because they still have collusion/s using, for example, the beginnings of the Old Testament and the beginning of the Quran, measuring and maintaining the guides that they have right up front that direct the only thing that matters. And all that is to be defended is the part in the beginning of the Old Testament, for example, it says all only defend right here. But no one even heard about that part. But people pretend passions, emotions. Oh, sue me then. No, all right, get on paper. See the religious spots and people next to them, intelligence families, people tied to them. They use their difference, other people's differences, the way a breaching method knew they would. I'm not speaking about anything you can figure out because then you're going to leave out the rest. And nature's showing us that's why. We're supposed to speak about, no, you guys are preventing the offensive wire crimes, acts and methods. You guys have recorded predicate acts with facts methods. The people that are only allowed to be heard with the networks. The differences of the guilt of the intelligence families at the networks or next to them. And as families, they are and have been collusion/S with federal evidences, crime acts and methods, with identity theft, fraud, slander, falsified police reports, roles, collusions with all natures of crime scenes, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even when they're not in the cases. But increasingly, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the interbranch, the intelligence tied to them. Further, the names at next to relative body dumping spots and crime scenes, even when they're not connected. And increasingly ones that appear not to be connected. A breaching method is and has been roles with it. This is a breaching method that has collusion/S from off all campuses. To an extent, we could start discerning this, but the second we start discerning it, it brings revelations. Everyone is gotten over on, but through ourselves. So everyone starts blaming everyone else correctly, the way the breaching method knew, simultaneously wrongly, exactly the way it wanted and needs, because then it's going to have that defended. Everyone's leaving its roles out. Like, it's against the law if you pay attention to pretend it's debatable, that our founders left us directed to understand that and how they were forced, criminally foreign influence, private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, witch trials, courts, even if that was completely made up, they're still right next to the founding locations, still with other communicated for our founders for those locations. Then they have communicated for themselves. You guys are forcing, the differences between people used effectively to hide itself. And what's recorded is they're making fake ties between kids, trying to make fake examples. Oh, well, look, the intelligence has this recorded conversation with you. Joe DeMorrow, John DeMorrow, Paul DeMorrow, that will tell you. You have to ask them correctly, though, because they're being coached to percent. There are a bunch of agencies, foreign and domestic, sexual and medical offenders associated with them and their neighbors, and their roles with intelligence families on Route 3, Route 175, in conjunctions to them, like Walker Hill Road. Increasingly, they have roles with adults and kids, but all next to and at the campuses, intercities and intra-cities, and their educators involved with them with identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crimes, with former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, their family members. Increasingly, Rick Ciampaglione sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm with Tim O'Brien. Their family members have roles with people with courts and police departments, with our Ciampaglione family, who is involved on Griswold Street with a former Mayor Gold, with putting fake things in databases at kids' campuses with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, collusion/S, and more then and now involved. Increasingly, one of the teachers involved that she was a kid abused with fact-checking nature, identity theft, fraud, saying the people involved with the kids and the leaders of kids. There's a Harris family too, increasingly involved with a Fred Guzet and others with other countries, with a police chief Centron and a John Maano, and conjunctions to him, intercities and interstates and internationally, with the names he recorded. He sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm this. He was influenced to plant evidences and sequence just fake ties, fake natures of ties to me after my neighbor had graduated. And I stayed back per people associated with him, recorded a bunch of ways with different teachers I have roles of predicate acts with facts, repeating what other people say, when they weren't supposed to hide what's actually recorded. Increasingly, there's a whiting forensics with people involved with multiple courts, prosecutors, judges, their family members, their intimate ties, and their neighbors who intercities and intra-cities were brought into this. Increasingly, the roles with the fire departments, with foreign and domestic military, fire campuses, and not just the campuses, the ones that with the fires, and their roles with records keeping, their collusions with all natures of organized crimes, fakes, and with Wethersfield town offices haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. I wouldn't vote there. It would make it look like I don't realize stuff. In other words, those places are worthless and worse since founding. That's why you guys have left out and replaced what our founders communicated to have us understand about Black people's rights of eyes, reassignment of nature's communications roles, and with all exceptions in exception nature used to pretend other for the breaching method as roles too, simultaneously pretending that is your motivations for why and how you are preventing others to speak about the breaching method. You guys, in other words, you want to pretend over because I read more. I know all about this guy who I don't even know. Some colonel said something. Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. You guys want to use the knowledge, your knowledge of good and evil, to get over on who's right with the principles first. James Madison said that they left it to classify for themselves how and why they did not have free speech, how and why they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies since before they were born. More than 13 colonies. How all the records were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. To an extent, we could discern that. To an extent, all identities of roles with that. Whereas systems tactical ulterior from the one syntactically communicating to us. Revelations by and as nature's body itself generating totally different species bodies made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we could discern it as even our own identity of value progression. As a system, perfect, hyper-native pure shows us too. That's why it makes Native Americans their difference in value, valued by our founders, which are distinct from our presidents. People don't know how to explain the presidents, then they're going to defend themselves and pretend their integrity anyway. As the breaching method knew that they would, our country's A through Z, suit to ties, counters, and exceptions. Get them on. Get me off the fake conversations with CBS. CBS has intelligence next to them involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids at the campuses, intercities and intra-cities. A bunch of people from Wethersfield campuses involved with predicate acts on my street from other areas. With the House/S involved with fake conversations with me at the police station when I was a kid and as an adult, with a bunch of Wethersfield police chiefs and retired police chiefs and their intimate ties and families. With the FBI director. In other words, these things are too messy for them. That's why you have to follow mandated law here, because you guys bring things before courts that are still collusion/S, and with the people running the prisons and their campuses and the difference of their guilt or their family members, and how they have rules of all natures of social connections and divisions. That's recorded too. This is sustained every year since the World Trade Center attack. They've been confessing, demonstrating, recorded inter and intra cities, inter and intra campuses, the difference of guilt there or next to it, the same ones with the same guilt used to hide behind and through by the breaching method at the country. A bunch of people with New Britain Superior Court and the police forms tied to them have the judicial branch offices and their roles with Route 3 and its conjunctions and the families along there. I don't even know them. The only ones I know, they'll tell you that they only know me. They were influenced by as rules recorded with all natures of investigators and interbranch families, increasingly tied to a people named Gold, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids and people with the military involved at Central Connecticut State University. At the same time, with their differences with religious differences and the locations. And these are people A through Z. Have the audacity to want to speak about behavior, calmness, or aggression. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. Increasingly, CBS has a bunch of people tied to a Gail King are involved with Wethersfield Police and the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, and the differences of guilt as the intelligence at the network locations or next to them, or which person was running it and why and how this breaching method needs blame to hide behind and through. They're offensively pretending that blame is relativity where it's not, and it's hyper relativity too. For example, why and how slavery was entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, and northern states and southern states, because our breaching method only allowed it still entrenched to measure and maintain who was behind James Madison's plan. Who was James Madison? That's why he didn't have free speech in his lifetime. And no one even allows people to be honest about George Washington. Then they have to pretend that they have integrity anyway. So they value that they know the name of the 4P3 missile or that and that. Oh, you don't know about the economic hot? Get the heck on paper. You guys owe money. And you guys are making ourselves guilty when you jump into other people's conversations and change and fake what they say. And then you want to have a debate about motivations. A bunch of women judges and male judges within the British Superior Court have the FBI Director Robert Luskin intercities and intra-cities with the people interstates and international at Central Connecticut State University. Also involved all along Route 175, the conjunctions to it and to that. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed as people increasingly with the houses and businesses next to Hartford Hospital involved personally and professionally with them, with organized crime acts and names involved against elderly, only people allowed to help them too, and against kids, only people allowed to help them too. The same ones avert criminal enterprises and private ones. Oh, he's talking about guilt. I'm talking about the acts. Get me off the big conversation with WFSB. Follow mandated law for them. Get the interbranch involved with them onto paper, one name and sequence. Eric Burgess, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, with also his girlfriend for them. But then in other words, with Hartford courts and judges and their family members and intimate ties and their family members where they work and the locations of them, their kids, have roles along, the roads and routes and next to the campuses with predicate acts. And with the same house /S with extended family members with the principal child abuser and World Trade Center predicate acts with the news. As the same ones, interstates and internationally, who had time collusion /S with people named Scalora and people tied to them with the World Trade Center, names next to it, including the court next to it, names on all sides of that case, and the court itself had a sequence shift from in it. All that was in Manhattan, New York, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack. The same names have collusions with all sides of cases and interbranch and foreign at the same time. The same ones involved with the World Trade Center attack with Connecticut courts, switching names and forging names, refusing to get on paper. A bunch of female judges, including black and white judges, involved with some black KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed, involved with sexual medical offenders of kids, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, falsified police reports, identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake motivation screening, Mark Violet, and others on Zion Street in Hartford, next to Trinity College. The difference of the guilt there or next to it. A bunch of people there, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have my people that lived in my area in the past involved planting evidence on my street at the same time and sequence shit. Oh, I don't live in there. These are people I already had collusions with multiple police departments, with all kinds of natures of organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Get them the heck on paper into branch. Fix the fake news and stop fishing with everything that the agencies report so you can cover up what they're actually recorded doing and communicating. And then pretending but we have the right to lie. They're readings of statutes where they left out and faked exception nature. We're going to examine how all ages and natures of investigators, not by accident, had self-valued roles and have self-valued roles, replacing what nature communicates and what our founders communicate about a breaching method that reassigned black pupils white to communications. Therefore, black and white You guys left this out. You guys left out and replaced it. You keep our founders framed. You pretend it's debatable. Our founders directed us to understand that, and how the James Madison is the only founder's name we know. You guys want to pretend it's debatable. You want to use the knowledge of good and evil to pretend other. Then you can't defend that and afford not to self-value roles with where and how, which recorded to Central Connecticut State University in Connecticut, inter and intra-cities, inter and intra-campuses. They have predicate acts with facts and methods of them. Also, on all sides of the kids' houses and through time, exploitations of it. These are people with positions with the military, with foreign and domestic. Russians, Americans, Ukraine, they're all shared. They're not legitimately with nuclear. They're implying it's nuclear. A whole bunch of people tied to a Hansen family. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Weathersfield police and their sources have roles with sexual and medical offenders. And she reportedly confessed that to my father too. And I recorded this, and they hid it with a bunch of judges, prosecutors, their family members. There are some black, white, female judges involved with the principal upskirt nature, involved with more upskirt nature since then too, since they had rules forcing that and other with the principal upskirt nature's campus, with New Britain Superior Court, the same ones with passion crimes as this, collusions with the World Trade Center predicate acts. They've been threatening and torturing me, not to say anything about what I caught them doing since before the World Trade Center attack. Harper Court's families, I found out former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, their family members, all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions. They have collusions and had collusions at town lines and on and off campuses, and their roles with the kids of the leaders of the kids. Rick Ciampaglione is one of the ones involved with prosecutors and judges and interbranch family members and foreign ones with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake ties, fake natures, ties to me, and acting tied to the people, putting predicate acts in databases. A Leahy family also faked conversations with me and at Hartford Hospital. Has something to do with their roles with corners of buildings and try to make fake exceptions of people knowing each other. Increasingly, as people from other areas who have roles of predicate acts with facts on my street, they have roles of people named Lombardo and Leahy I never saw on my street. My school recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are intelligence people like with the name Dylan and people tied to him, involved also with the seating of classes in their roles with people named Lombardo and conjunctions to a Lombardo family with sexual and medical offenders of kids, also with the Hartford Hospital and the security there. And they have roles with foreign and domestic military investigations, investigators of wars and of crime scenes who have collusions right through it. We're going to examine the collusions right through world wars. And you guys have other things, others ourselves, blamed for the cause of the Civil War. And you have all truths used for lies, even slavery. Our founders / James Madison, as the only one we know of the name of, his plan, James Madison's plan, caused the Constitutional Convention, caused the Declaration of Independence, caused the Civil War, caused us directed to understand the most important policy is getting the Constitution unabridged at last. Understanding why the at last part is necessary. We all stands abridged. It is recorded this way. We're going to have to appreciate the hyper-evidential. It is hyper-evidential that names on all sides of criminal and civil cases were brought up. There's a detective, Samuda, as one of the ones involved with wire crime acts and methods, also sexually themed, with an Elena Davenport tied to a Heather Hansen and a sexual circle she was in that was forced on Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that through time, as people involved also with spots along the Berlin Turnpike and their rules with syntax, with ad placements, and their roles with intelligence families. Bunch of people with the FBI tie. And these are good people that I don't even know, like Mortensen's. You guys have syntax and people associated with the John Maiano, who has a bunch of countries involved with foreign and domestic identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people involved on my street who brought him into it, their confessions, because he used to hang around with them. I don't even know them. They're involved with the FBI director who makes illusions and have people pretend other. So John Maiano has roles. Also with people with the name Casper. There's a guy at Hartford Hospital. There are men and women at Hartford Hospital involved with the Anthony Yagman and his roles with people involved with past. In other words, I never saw him in my area in my life, or his brother. He was in my algebra class, is increasingly involved with various natures of organized crimes, and people involved with medical corruption with New Britain Superior Court is increasingly involved with various natures of organized crimes, overt criminal enterprises, and private ones, collusions, and pretending and showing needs to pretend other. As their roles with counters to such, also as collusions with and as names with the state corrections officers, judicial branch offices, the same ones at and next to Harvard Hospital, law agents and natures of investigations, investigators and subject treatments, involve self-valued roles or sentencing for the breach of anyone not self-valued roles with criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw fact, true nature, quality aspects, and nature, and collusion/S. A bunch of people next to Hartford, on Main Street in Hartford, and conjunctive to like Fox Connecticut News, have their educators and their roles with journalists and their family members from the campuses. It has something to do along with the spots and along Franklin Avenue, for example, which is one of the roads that goes by Hartford Hospital. The businesses and houses there, ones with the name Aiello, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people named a former Mayor Gold, has rules with people involved with organized crimes, home break-ins in my area, untimely death rolls, murders rolls, overt criminal enterprise, private ones. Before I even knew who ever even saw a Joe Aiello, I only know him planting evidences and collusions, all exception nature, pretending passions, emotions to pretend other. He's one of the ones with the Aiello's Kitchen, and I forgot the name of the hairdress place, but next to Buckley High School and next to Hartford Hospital. That's one not far from Hartford Hospital. Also with the Morals Market, where it was then and now, and conjunctions to it and names associated with that. Increasingly involved with federal evidences, crimes at next to the campuses I went, intercities, and time collusion/S with people from other area planting evidences and fake motivations on my street. And people are rightfully scared to get into conversations about intelligence corruption where they're being threatened and demonstrated to, but through communications. They want to go on what's said out of sequence. In other words. And this is all manifest because there's a hyperforum that's keeping the confessions. This breaching method had locations, areas, and states making confessions to it without even knowing they were making confessions. And the names of the people the scientists were making confessions since before religious messengers were born, since before the church used confessions. And they couldn't explain properly why and how. And they knew that the people who would explain it as collusion/S with what the religions are trying to get us to overcome and do damage control against. Because this breaching method already had it bridged from off the campuses, maintained collusions hyper-additionally there. It needs to hide behind those hyper-additional apparent and even the real motivations propagated by the breaching method so it could stay hiding through it. Because a human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that nature itself shows us that is true always, what those breaching method laws were about. Reassigning Black people's rights of access communications, for example, before America's founders were born, rolls with that. Rolls with it, measured and maintained by a method, not just internationally in companies. Those countries, since before while they became modern countries, watch the interview between Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson. He cuts him off. Tucker does, because Tucker's campus and campuses A through Z. Tucker's campus, Trinity College, has people named Cololo and Fred Grouze involved with multiple retired police chiefs and their intimate ties, involved with sexual and medical offenders, and their confessions about also with people named O'Brien, with a modern pastry and a Mazzucato bakery, have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders. There are slanders with them, conversations with them that are criminally for an influence for them to repeat fake things, fake ties, fake nature of ties to me. These are also people on off Town Line Drive, record, confess, demonstrate, confirm their roles with like managers of the places through different ownerships, where they have collusions intercities and with people with the state capital. Mark Violet is one of the ones who sought me out on my street. I never even tried to contact him. He's the one who sought me out to demonstrate he has roles with people with intelligence families near me, involved at the state capitol and next to it, and with their educators. I never had a class with them, never saw them around campus. They tried to make a fake exception a couple of times, which is one of the things that ties all the people who have collusions with World Trade Center predicate acts directly and indirectly. In other words, and the news, identity theft, fraud, slanders at the same time with the interbranch planting fake transcripts on a mass scale, fake motivations too, all real motivations used to hide that. There's an O'Neill family who has their kids as educators and their roles with intelligence in West Hartford, also involved inter and intra-cities of Connecticut, and their own personal kids with Wethersfield, involved with them, also with the Leahy family with their kids, putting fake transcripts, wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders at the same time with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, people next to body dumping spots. All this stuff was brought up at the same time, untimely deaths. You guys made all these confessions, intercities with people that connected to the families next to the campuses, intercities, with the same house, involved increasingly with wire crimes with the Wethersfield police and the ones that pretended they had conversations with me, increasingly involved with the Dillon family too, and people and my algebra class teacher repeated sexual things about a person that lives near me, and a Mike Domain repeated that she was Jewish, and that he was Jewish, and that teacher was Jewish, and I didn't respond. I showed no reaction, and the only other one was in the class was Anthony Agaman. He's increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders too. Never had a word of conversation with him. He has his brother too. In other words, I did speak with his brother when I was younger, and that was a fake exception so they could make it look like I spoke with them, as their roles with these Mendez police and judges and prosecutors involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with foreign and domestic doctors, and their roles all along routes 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, and as people who had conversations with their educators behind my back that were affected by others, though. In other words, they're trying to say, "Oh, you're saying that about them." No, in other words, they're increasingly they'll confess that they were all attached to fake and changed communications. Increasingly, there's a bunch of people that they pretend they have the intelligence families have used the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. Increasingly, a Dawn LaConch. I never saw her on a campus in my life. One time I walked by her real quick. It was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed the FBI director, Robert Luskin, in various courts and sexual and medical offenders of kids and people involved with syntax regarding their families' roles with all these different countries. They have time collusions with that. And these are the people at New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts are confessing this also with silence, as the ones involved also with District Court of Connecticut, with FBI Director Robert Luskin before and after the World Trade Center attack, with the court's families in foreign and domestic military, and people timed collusions with the Saudi attackers, and as people involved with Wethersfield Police confessions regarding a Scalora family. A Scalora family is involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and police forging and switching names and faking ties and natures of ties to me, as one of the people involved also with a family that's involved with a Scalora family, that's also involved with a Phil Collo, who says that's their cousin. Phil Collo is further with a Bob Chase, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids with whiting forensics through time, identity theft, fraud, slanders. I never had a class with with what's his name, fifth flow in my life. The only time I ever saw him on campus was one time from a distance, and the people standing next to me are increasingly involved, even on Facebook, trying to cover up my progressions and collusions with the Wethersfield police. Also at the police station, put fake to conversation ties to me as a kid, and now as an adult with the ones involved. Different, more and more people they got involved with this. In other words, their narratives regarding the police chiefs who's retired, that's all criminally foreign influence. The investigators of it, too. That's all. They're off self-value rules with that. Then they go speak anyway. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. I'll show you how to fix it.